meeting that held yesterday between the federal government and Labour ended in deadlock. Good morning and welcome to the Dailies. It is a new month and we want to wish you a happy new month from here in Echo Television International. The program is the Dailies, as you know, where we will be keeping you updated with what is happening from our Nigerian newspaper. I am Sela Elisha Dasham, and of course I have Rachel Tanzindo. Good morning, Rachel.
Sarah.
How are you doing?
I'm fine. How about you?
Great, thank you. Happy New Month.
Thank you. I should say.
Yes, we're live on Facebook and on YouTube. Please do well to drop your comments and your thoughts on stories that are of interest to you as they are on the paper. And we will be going straight away to the paper, starting with the New Telegraph newspaper.
On New Telegraph newspaper, Senate presidency, a case for Southeast. This is an editorial that you can find inside the paper on page 13. External reserves slide further to $35.15 billion in 1 week. Falana drags federal government to court over no work, no pay policy slammed on ASU. PDP can expel Wike following provisions of law. This is coming from court rules. Senate uncovers how MDAs abused 3.8 trillion naira service-wide vote. You can find the details on page 7. Uzodinma emerges PGF's chairman. The details can be found on page 2. And the big story on New Telegraph, federal government organized labor meeting on fuel subsidy removal deadlocked. The rider flowing that Labour wants pump price reversed. Government only engaged Labour on way forward after subsidy removal, coming from Alake. NNPCL hikes petrol pump prices nationwide by over 200%. NE 557 naira, NW 540 naira, NC 537 naira. We have SE 520 naira, SS we have 511 naira, and then from the southwest we are having 500 naira, Lagos 488 naira, and these are all the prices of fuel pump prices all across Nigeria, from the northeast, northwest, and down to Lagos. And we still have downstream sectors fully deregulated, coming from Ipman. EFCC have former PDP chairson, others perpetrate oil subsidy fraud. You can find the details on page 2, 5, and 29. Still on Senate presidency, used to stage 2 million man march for Kalu. Ezeo Kenwa emerges Afghan national chairman. Terrorists kidnap 2 APC women leaders and others in Kaduna as gunmen kill 2, abduct 2 others in Ogun State. The details can be found on page 4 and 31. CBN defrayed nearly $700 million foreign carriers funds. This is still on airlines. Says January to April 2023 outstanding. United Nigeria Airlines planes kits off Lagos Airport runway. You can find the details on page 4 and 7. And on presidential poll, Atiku presents 118 exhibits against Tinubu. The writer flowing the story, President APC opposed standard exhibits. Tribunal adjourns Obi's petition over illness of his key staff. At the downside of the paper, we have a study, mental condition increases sleep disorder risk. The details can be found on page 29, and that's all the news on New Telegraph newspaper.
On Daily Sun newspaper, PDP has right to suspend, expel you, court tells Wike. 2 senators resign membership of the party. You can find detail of that story on page 27. The big story, NNPCL unveils new fuel price regime. Petrol 9 537 naira per litre in Abuja, 577 naira in Borno, 488 naira in Lagos. Commuters groan as transport fare spike. Federal government Labour spoil for showdown. Nigerians in challenging moment over subsidy removal, coming from Adamu, the APC chairman. You can find all of that on page 6 and 28. we have a column here that actually shows the new pump price across the various states. So you can do well to actually grab the Daily Sun newspaper and read extensively and see what the pump price will be in your own state, and then to be sure that you don't have where we have filling station, taking their own price out of what the expected price coming from the NNPCL. So you can please do well to do that. We've seen here petrol station workers adjusting the pumps to reflect the new fuel prices at the NNPC fuel station. This is in Abuja yesterday, so you hope to see more of this across the various, taxi state and also the FCT. You hope to see all of that. Still on Daily Sun, we have presidential polls. INEC reject own documents in Atiku. PDP petition against Tinubu with the rider. Obi Labour Party postponed to continue presentation today over ill health of 2 key staff. You can find that on page 27. As to fight back, drag government to court over discriminatory payment of salaries. You can find detailed in the paper. And on the subsidy, federal government organized labor meeting deadlock. Workers insist on return to status quo, saying no consensus reached. You can find all of that as well on page 2. League of Africa Ambassadors debuts. You can find that also in the paper. And on the Senate leadership, Igbo youth plan 2 million man march for Kalu, urge Tinubu to release Kanu. You can find more of that on page 28. APC elect Ozodinma chair Progressive Governors Forum. You can find more of that on page 27. And just to talk a little about these new prices, of course, I know Nigerians will be really sad because already Nigerians are sad. I think from Tuesday morning, we saw where there was already the scarcity was there, and then the meeting yesterday, Nigerians were hoping that maybe the Nigerian Labour Congress will come to a consensus with the federal government, looking at the fact that the reason why we were paying, or the Nigerian government were paying the fuel subsidy, is to actually, caution the effect on the common man, so he or she will be able to afford to buy this petrol at a subsidized price. But then we saw that the meeting didn't really go as expected. And we've seen that already the NNPCL has given the new prices. We're already feeling the impact. Whether you have your car or not, we're already feeling the impact. Transport fare is twice the price right now. Food prices, of course, is going to get high because petrol. And then when I was coming to work this morning, I noticed that most of the fuel stations were shut down. So it's either they have or they don't have the product, or they're still trying to regulate the price. So I just hope that this government actually have a way, a soft landing for the masses, because believe you me, imagine you buying, from the price we saw here, if especially we're talking about North Central, we'll be buying the fuel at 537 naira per liter.
The list is Lagos with 488.
And then Lagos 488 naira. I think in Abuja the price is also, it's quite different. So it determines where your zone is, determines the price you will get this petrol. And then you have to look at the common man for somebody that is not earning up to that. And then you have a small scale business you need to maintain. We're still talking about power. So I feel that the government should look into what they can do about the power sector, because that will really have a way of having a soft landing on Nigerians. And then even though the masses were expecting that even if they're going to remove the fuel subsidy, it should be a 50% removal so that they don't feel the impact. But then it was a total removal. So we hope the government have other means to make sure that Nigerians don't get affected by all of this. Already we are seeing that the APC chairman is saying Nigerians in a challenging moment. It's very challenging, but then what is the present APC administration planning to do for Nigerians so they don't feel the effect of this, the price?
Of course, Stella. When it comes to fuel pump price as it is now, it is a challenge. However, I'll keep saying what matters depends on how long this hardship is on Nigerians, how long it lasts. That's how it shows that the government truly have the people in mind. Because when you look at it, we keep saying when it comes to things like this, the timing can never be perfect, because you can never say when, because as it is now, a lot of things are not moving well. The timing can never be perfect. But if the government have decided to go about it as it is now, then we hope that they're putting things in place that this doesn't last for long. That is, we're not looking at us going for years or about 6 months, 3 months. I feel that a month, 2 months, 3 is a lot of time for Nigerians to go through this kind of hardship. I'm hoping that before this year runs out, we will be having our fuel pump price coming back to normal, not just normal, but going lower than what it used to be. If it can go back to 200, we would be happy as a country that we are able to have the fuel pump price go low. Now, the only thing that I would say, I don't know if it is positive. Of course, it can't be selling when we already have transport fare like going high. But I'm seeing that the NNPCL are bringing out a list. They said it's a new fuel price regime, and then we are seeing that, you know what, now you should know that any other thing above these prices is exploit coming from whatever fuel station, be it black market or no, or not. I'm hoping, Sele, that this will continue like this, that it doesn't stop from the NNPCL bringing out a list of what we should expect at fuel pump price. Now, indirectly, we have an idea what was subsidized in the first place. If this is what the NNPCL is saying we will expect in the Northwest, the Northeast, the South Side, and all of that, we already have an idea that this was how much subsidy we were getting from the petrol we've been buying despite the hike and the increase. But not only will it stop here, but that they will go further to make sure that there is no exploit out of this, because as it is now, it already stands. And for fuel stations that will hoard, we've already said that yesterday, there should be a sanction. And it's also their job to make sure that there is no scarcity. Because once there is scarcity, whether we like it or not, these prices are just for paper's sake. Once there is scarcity, we will have more than this. And in some places, it can go as high as 600 naira, because we have the Far East having that kind of outrageous amount of fuel price. So I'm just looking forward to the government just putting in everything in place, Sele, for the hardship to be less on Nigerians.
Of course, of course. Well, we can do well to just get the Daily Sun or a detail of any of the stories, and that's all on the Daily Sun newspaper.
On the Vanguard newspaper, stock market investment sentiment often softened to 0.06%. You can find the details on page 19. Bandit kill vigilante leader, 17 others in Zamfara. Meet Southern Middle Belt leaders to wave Nigeria together again, Abakoba advises Tinubu. Jonathan, NPO, NPAN, Senate, Obasaki, Mondo, Percy. You can find the details on page 7. 10th National Assembly leadership, APC Tinubu allegedly back out of Akpabio's endorsement. And the big story on Vanguard newspaper, petrol above 500 naira per litre as subsidy removal takes effect. NNPCL confirms hike adjusts pumps nationwide. Borno, Yobe, most expensive state with 557 naira per litre. Lagos remains least with 488 naira per litre. The regulation will enhance growth coming from NEITI. Federal government meeting with NLC, TUC ends in deadlock. Meeting to reconvene Sunday as labor leaders meet Friday. Federal government should rehabilitate refineries coming from NECA, and APC governors back Tinubu on subsidy removal, say Atiku Obi also promised same. On presidential tribunal, Tinubu, APC opposed tendering of evidence from Beavers. You can find the details on page 9. 10th National Assembly leadership, Omisore G6 meeting ends in deadlock. The details can be found on page 29. We have a column for Olufasa, and you can find on page 16. Gens reject Galatasaray's 15 million euros offer for gift. Orban. The details can be found on page 35. Now, sports sector, we have a picture story that says petrol price up, queues grow. And that's all the news on Vanguard newspaper.
On the leadership newspaper, APC Governor speak Ozodinma as the PGF chairman. Tinubu, INEC, APC asks tribunal to dismiss Atiku's documents. You can find on page 7. And on subsidy removal, political parties condemn hoarding of the petrol. Experts seek 50% carbon emission reduction. You can find more of that story on page 2 of the Leadership newspaper. And we have on subsidy removal, federal government labor talks deadlocked as marketers raise fuel price. And we have the rider NNPCL confirms 557 naira per liter, cites current reality. NLC reject the new pricing template. We are in their movement, APC chairman Adamu laments. Stakeholders call for palliative to caution the effect. You can find more of that on page 4. And also we see for the places where we saw that mostly the northeast are the ones buying at a higher price. We hope something will be done because basically they are the ones that have really suffered from the Boko Haram and all of that. So them buying at a higher price. I'm even worried because the fact that this price we're talking about, Richard, is at NNPCL. So when it gets ordered out like that, it's not NNPCL, it will be higher.
One thing
that is what it is.
Yes, and I noticed something coming to work that the queue at the NNPC mega filling station was less compared to how it used to be. And based on the question I asked was that the price is not that different from other petrol stations. So people are like, if the difference is just 10 naira or 20 naira in the NNPC mega filling station, why should I stay for a longer queue? And I realized that unlike the massive long queue that I see coming to work at the mega filling station, is no longer like that. And the reason being that there is no much pump price difference compared to the NNPC and every other regular fuel station.
And I hope that they work on their, talking about their, some of the pump are really not good. Because let's say you go to buy 4 or 5 liters and then you realize that the pump is not really working well. It like kind of adjusted. So I hope that they should pity the masses that go there, not temper with the pump while trying to give more petrol. We're still on the Leadership newspaper. Tackled insecurity, poverty, Northern elders tell the president. You can find on page 7 of the Leadership newspaper. Troops kill 55 ISWAP top commanders, terrorists in Borno. And on Nigerian tax to GDP ratio rises to 10.86%. You can find that on page 27. We still have the queue showing motorists standing at the filling station in Abuja yesterday trying to get some fuel. And that's all on the Leadership newspaper.
On the Punch newspaper, CBN multiple exchange rates may increase debt burden. This is coming from the World Bank. And one of the economic policy that the current president, Bola Ahmed Asiwaju, said was to make sure that we have a single exchange rate in the country, because so far so good, we've not had one single exchange rate. And then World Bank is now warning that it might increase our debt burden. So we're looking forward to the president really working on making sure we have one single exchange rate. And if it's going to help with our debt burden, then of course we are looking forward to that. You can find the details inside the paper on page 30. The big story on the Punch newspaper, federal government labor meeting deadlocked as fuel price hits over 700 naira per liter. NLC kicks rejects petrol price hike. Economic hardship will worsen, says marketers. PDP Labour Party orders slam the federal government. You can find details on page 2. We have congratulations coming from Abdulaziz Yari, Senator-elect, to the President, His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And that's all the news on the Punch newspaper.
On the Nation newspaper, National Honors Awardees to wait. You can find more inside the paper. Hearing in Labour Party OB petition stalled, PDP fought ahead. You can find more of that story as well on page 6. And we have Tinubu promised to improve economic, excite young entrepreneurs. 200 reps backing me, says Abbas. Lukman slammed the party chair at the mood. You can start reading on the front page and continue reading in the paper. NNPCL fixes 488 naira and 557 naira per liter petrol price template. Price to fluctuate in accordance with MAC focus. NLC TUC demand return to the old price. and government negotiation continues. You can find more detail of the story inside the paper. We have cross-section of various picture stories. One we can see is the president and many others too. So you can do well to get the Nation and read more details of stories of interest to you.
On the Guardian newspaper, 26% of Nigerians financially literate as Botswana leads Africa. OT suspends levies on transport operators in Abia. You can find the details on page 8. Resetting Nigeria's foreign policy to be giant of Africa again. And the big story on the Guardian newspaper, fuel subsidy removal poses about $800 million palliative. Labour's next move as Nigerians brace for higher inflation. And we can see a chart where we can see inflation over the years starting from 1999 up to 2023 concerning the fuel pump prices in Nigeria. Still on the Guardian newspaper, no work, no pay. Falana sues federal government over alleged unfair treatment of ASU members. The details can be found on page 3. Panic in Lagos community over fuel leakage and broken pipeline. The details can be found inside the paper on page 12, and that's all the news on the Guardian newspaper.
Daily Independent newspaper, Nigerian tax to GDP ratio rose to 10.86% as of 2021, coming from the first Inland Revenue Service. You can find detail inside the paper. Senate uncovers how MDAs abused 3.8 trillion naira service-wide votes. Labour reject new fuel price, says it's ambush on Nigerians, with the rider opens talks with federal government, wants it to go back to status quo. NNPC increased fuel price between 488 naira and 557 naira per litre. Still on Daily Independent, PDP has right to suspend and expel Wike court rules. ASU sues federal government over discriminatory treatment of members. Removing fuel subsidy now very challenging, Adamu tells the APC governors. You can find detail on page 7. Panic as United Nigerian planes skate off runway with 50 passengers. You can find more on page 6 as well. Rivers governor swears in commissioners 48 hours after inauguration. You can find detail of that story as well on page 6. And Nigerian aircraft returns to service in Ethiopian Airlines colors. Downside of the paper, Ozondema emerges chairman Progressive Governors Forum. You can find that on page 6, and we still have the picture stories showing President Bola Tinubu and also a special envoy of Chinese president, where they were having some, talks on how Nigeria can, work on its foreign investors. And that's all on the Daily Independent newspaper.
On this day newspaper, with end of subsidy, NNPC raises petrol price to between 488 naira and 557 naira per litre. The writer flowing the story, workers insist on status quo as federal government NLC meeting in deadlock. You can't ask partner to negotiate at gunpoint, says Ajaro. HURIWA condemns upward review of pump prices. NECA cautions against escalation of inflation. You can start with the details on the front page and continue on page 48. Access Bank targets Nigeria's $4 billion trade with France, launches business decks. PDP has right to suspend, expel you, court tells Wike. Adhere to our party's manifesto, Adamu urges APC governors, explains time of subsidy removal will be challenging to them. Uzodinma emerges PGF chair, says all presidential candidates promise to remove subsidy. You can continue with the story on page 48. And the big story on this day newspaper, we're ready for business partnership with willing nations, coming from Tinubu, says Nigeria will remain non-aligned. China pledges increased economic cooperation with Nigeria. EFCC chair meets president, briefs him on state of anti-graft war. And we have a picture story, strategic partnership. And that's all the news on this day newspaper.
On Blueprint newspaper, we have Topiski debt shocking momental loss coming from the MPAN. You can find inside the paper. China pledges increased economic cooperation with Nigeria. You can find on page 18. The big story, Nigerians to Tinubu. Where is January and June? Where is January and June? 3.36 trillion naira subsidy budget. This is a question Nigerians are asking Tinubu, that where is the January to June 3.36 trillion naira subsidy budget? With the rider, NNPCL hikes pump price to 557 naira per litre. Transport fares skyrocket. NLC threatening to discontinue dialogue. Manufacturers back Tinubu. You can find detail of that story on page 6. Ubasani assures improved support for crime fight. You can find more of that story on page 18. And Nigerians tax to GDP now 10.86% coming from the FRRS. And on tobacco, we have tobacco kills 8 million globally annually coming from the World Health Organization. You can find more detail of that story on page 13. That was during the Tobacco Day that was celebrated last month. Don't go outside APC manifestos. NWC won the new APC governors. Ozodinma emerges the PGF chairman, which you can find on page 6. We still have picture story showing the NNPC adjusting the pump price in various filling stations. And that's all on the Blueprint newspaper. But before we move further, Rachel, let's take a break at this moment so we can let our callers to call in based on the stories on the paper. What do you feel about the new price for petrol in the various, state, looking at wherever zone you're coming from? The price is between 488 naira and 557 naira per litre. So this is really, I think, a bone of contention we all have to talk about. So we'd love to hear your inputs about the story when we come back from the break. Please do not go anywhere. Welcome back. Thank you for staying tuned. It's still the Dailies on your winning station. And before we went on that quick break, we were actually going through some of the stories that are reflecting on our paper, where we saw that the talks between the federal government and the NLC ended in deadlock, and the NLC actually threatening to stop the dialogue. And also we've seen that there is a new price for the petrol in the various zones. So you have to go through the papers to see what is the price for your own zone or your own state, and then to be sure of what we are all getting into as a country. Our phone lines are open at this moment. You can please do well to call us. We'd love to hear what your inputs are concerning the story. Please, let's remember to be very civil when we call in, and also to turn down the volume of your TV set when you call us here on the show. I still have Rachel Tanzi with me. Thanks so much, Rachel. All right, let's continue with the newspaper review.
On First News newspaper, Iworiso Maxine supporters return to PDP, says Diri deserves a second term. Tinubu's daughter updates Twitter bio at first daughter of FRN. How MDAs frittered away 3.8 trillion naira under Buhari. This is a report. Nigeria ready to do business with any country, coming from Tinubu. And the big story, fuel subsidy, federal government, NLC talks deadlock as meeting ends in stalemate. Petrol now sells for 540 naira, 488 naira in Abuja and Lagos. NNPC fixes prices of fuel nationwide, backs petrol pump price hike. Civil servants, military to experience delay in May salaries as MDAs await debit from CBN. PDP has right to suspend, expel you, court tells Wike. Uzodinma emerges EPC governor's chairman. Nigeria tax to GDP ratio rose to 10.86% in 2021, a report coming from the Federal Inland Revenue Service. And that's all the news on First News newspaper.
Well, you know, the story is saying that civil servants and military to experience delay in meet salaries as MDs await debits from CBN. I wonder what the problem is. Let's not forget there are still states that the civil servants and even the military maybe have not yet gotten salary even before me. We have states like, for example, here at the Plateau State where we have civil servants have not received their salary far back from March. And we are in the new month, June. So you begin to ask, what is the government planning to do about this salary, this backlog of salary that is awaiting? And with this new price of petrol, you know the effect, how it's going to really affect Nigerians and the civil servant, those who depend on whatever salary they get to actually feed their family, for people who don't have any business. So we are calling on the government to please look into this. Whatever the issue is, whatever is resulting into this delay of their payments, the government should please be very swift into action to do something about it. Let's not forget pensioners already. Some of them have not been treated from last year. So I just hope that the government will also look into that, not just about the May salary, but also some who have not gotten their salary from last year or even from February and also March. So I hope that the government is planning to do something about that.
Anytime you see such a mistake, Sele, you realize that someone didn't do what they were expected to do at a particular time. And I keep saying it, why do we have a system where we wait for an administration to go first before we start pointing out lapses? We saw that from ministers saying they were not supposed to be in this office. Why did you have to wait for 3-4 years, enjoying all the benefits in that office, not working and waiting until when things were about to end, then you start pointing blame? I'm seeing the same thing here. Why are we saying? Because it's showing up here saying how MDAs fitted away 3.8 trillion naira under Buhari, and this is the same reason as the MDAs await from deputy. This is the same reason that is causing this problem now for the CBN and then other civil servants and then the military. So why do we have to wait? Because I don't want to believe this thing was just noticed yesterday. Why do we have to wait when an administration is on? We are not taking accountability and transparency seriously. We are not asking all these questions. What happened to this money while it's going on? It's like we've been giving the money for a project in 2021. And 2022 has come and that project wasn't done in 2021. Nobody is asking in 2022 while the administration is still going on, and we have to wait till 2023 when the administration is gone to start asking questions. It doesn't make sense. It feels like we don't even want to grow by the way we act concerning certain things. So I just hope that we have a system that doesn't tolerate things like this, that things are being dealt with there and there. There should be accountability, transparency, so that we wouldn't have something like this that should have been treated while the administration was on seat, now coming to be a problem that will delay the payment of military and the civil service.
Of course, you just said the word, Rachel, lack of accountability and transparency is what we are having. We've seen corruption eating deep into all of this, the MDAs, and that is why we're having issues like this. So I just hope that this incoming administration, of course, we can't call back the past administration to rectify their wrong. But then one thing for sure is that this incoming administration, you have inherited both the good, the bad, and the ugly. So you have to really rectify the wrongs. Thank God it's still the same party that are still in power. So I hope that this present administration will really, really look into accountability, because we've never heard where the House of Reps or the Senate were on strike because they were not paid their allowances. It has never happened. Why? Because they always get what they deserve. So I think it will only be right at a time like this that you think about the civil servants and the military. We keep pushing them to be at the forefront, and then when we don't meet their demands, how do we expect them to take care of their loved ones that they live at home, not knowing if they will be back or not? So I really, really think that this administration needs to look into it. Already Nigerians are looking at the severance package that will be given to our outgoing House of Representatives. We're talking about 30 billion naira. Not to talk about the allowances they have gathered while in the
No.
office. So you begin to look at the whole thing. Of course, they deserve it because they serve in that, capacity. But why don't we look into taking care of other people that keep your job, because somebody somewhere gave you the job you have. All right, we have a call. Hello, good morning. Please, can you turn down the volume of your TV set? Hello, good morning. Turn down the volume of your TV set, please.
Yeah. Good morning.
Morning. Sorry, turn it down or we'll have to end the call because we can barely hear you, sir.
I'd like to comment concerning this fuel subsidy.
Hello, sir. Maybe you should end the call and call us back again. Thank you so much. Please, to our callers, turn down the volume of your TV set because we could barely hear you here in the studio because you are listening to your TV set. Please endeavor to turn down the volume of your TV set completely, or you move away from where your TV set is so we can hear you clearly here in the studio. We really love to hear what your contributions are, because this is the time for you to call in. So please enable to do just that. Yeah, Rachel, were you adding up to something?
No, you were the one.
All right. So I think that is just it. Well, let's continue with the newspaper. Is that all on the paper?
Yes, that's all the news on first.
All
news,
right.
yes.
Let's take a look at the Nigerian News Direct newspaper. China pledges increased economic cooperation. I take that story. China pledges increased economic cooperation with Nigeria. You can find on page 3. Sanwo-Olu addresses GI Tech's One African Digit Summit in Morocco. You can find also on page 2. ICPC docs fire official over job racketeering. You can find all of that as well in the paper. And on subsidy removal, despite growing frustration, APC governors back Tinubu. NNPCL adopts average price of 500 naira per litre. Transportation costs hike by over 50% in Lagos. Increase in fuel price will accelerate inflation coming from NECA. NLC reject pricing template. You can find all of that on page 4. 2023 budget implementation. New governors lament over multi-trillion naira debt of predecessors. You can find all of that on page 3. Key into party manifesto meet voters' expectation, APC tells governors. You can be expelled, suspended from PDP, court tells Wike. And on Senate presidency, Akpabio aspiration runs into murky waters. You can find all of that on page 22. We have 2 picture stories. One, we have the governor of Lagos State, I think, during the meeting with those from Morocco. And also we have another picture story up here. You can do well to get the Nigerian News Direct and read stories that of interest to you.
On Business Day newspaper, manufacturers' unsold goods jumped 22% in 1 year. This is on inflation. You can start with the details on the front page and continue on page 20. As subsidy goes, Nigerians demand cut in governance cost. Nigeria air gobs 85 billion naira in 8 years, yet airport infrastructure suffers. Banking agents rise 41% on new mobile money licenses. Echo Bridge, 1 more month of suffering as federal government details. You can find the details on page 2, and that's all the news on Business Day newspaper.
Alright, still on the world of business, on the Business Standard, we have dollar rate up again for remittance and export. This is a paper from Bangladesh. You can do well to read more of that. Between political imperative and economic reality, you read more of that as well. An uphill battle for Kamal in election year. Looking at the budget, inflation, and tax, I think inflation is actually affecting everybody. Of course, from the Business Day newspaper, we could tell that definitely with the increase of fuel price, inflation, we can't just run away from that. So now you begin to ask questions. Not just, I'm bringing this up because we can see it reflecting on the paper. Now, what is the government doing? Because we've seen from the Business Day newspaper where sorry, and I need to get that paper back, okay, where we are seeing that as subsidy goes, Nigerians demand cut in governance costs. Of course, people, especially talking about entrepreneurs, people are looking at what is the government hoping to do. Why don't we cut the governance, cost of governance? Let's share the pain. Because as it looks presently, from the point of view, from the perspective of Nigerians, they are the ones at the receiving end. The entire pain is on Nigerians and nobody else, because of course you begin to ask questions, because Nigerians believe that those who are up there have no idea whatsoever what the pain and the hardship that will be inflicted on them. So we have to look into what is the government looking into, what is our budget, how are we looking at the inflation rate, what are we going to do about it. We're also looking at our exchange rate. You're looking at one digit. How are you going to affect all of these things? Nigerians need to know what you intend to do. And the long run, we're not looking at the short term, planning. We're looking at the long term, what you hope to do for them. So with this inflation, is really something that we can't run away from it, even though it's a global thing. But we hope to see how Nigeria, especially looking at the business sector, we can look into that, because whether you like it or not, whether you are a buyer or a seller, this inflation will affect you on the long run. So we hope to see what our own government will do from this own end to be able to caution the effect on Nigerians.
Sally, are they ready to cut governance costs? Because when we are cutting down governance costs, it means cutting down allowances, cutting down the expenses that goes. It means cutting down every expenses for the people in office, from the senators, from the members of the House of Representatives, from the governors, from the local government chairmen that are not even having that much, from the presidency and everybody involved in governance. Are they ready to? Because when bills are being passed, just bills for accountability and transparency, of probing people in position concerning what they do with allocations and funds given to them, could not even pass. Such an important bill that will help Nigeria fight corruption by law was not even passed. Talk more of cutting costs of governance. I keep saying it, until we have selfless leaders, Sele. Leaders that are ready to make the sacrifice it takes to take Nigeria to the next level. I don't think we are moving towards the direction of growth, because amidst all the crises, amidst everything that was happening, the cost of governance remained high. Even when we had a pandemic and there was COVID and workers were being laid off, workers were not being paid and all of that, we never saw anywhere on the papers or any office or sectors or anybody in governance coming out to say the government have decided to cut cost of allowance, payment, this and that, to senators, to governors, to be able to help other private sectors, other government sectors that are not doing well. We are yet to see such sacrifices being made in Nigeria. Until we start seeing stuff like that, before we can say, yes, we have a selfless government that are willing to sacrifice even what they should benefit from the government to see that Nigeria grows. And for inflation, it's a lot of factors. That's one thing Nigerians don't understand, that even if, Sele, we have a system where the fuel pump price doesn't keep going high, for instance, as long as we have our naira losing its value, we will keep fighting inflation. We will keep struggling with inflation. So it all boils down to our government putting everything right. That is to say, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, Sele. There is so much work. Until we start fully consuming our own products, we will fight inflation. Even if we start consuming our own products, Sele, as long as we import the raw materials we saw of sugar, we will still be having inflation. Even if we are depending on, as long as we keep doing our exchange and naira keep devaluing, we will be fighting inflation. As long as we are importing oil, we will keep fighting inflation. It's just so many things attached to inflation that until the government put their foot down and work on all of these factors, we will keep struggling with inflation as a country. But we keep putting it out there. This is the work the government needs to do, and we hope they do the work.
You know, Richard, what I think, it was in this same country that we had a government that sealed the borders and we were not importing anything into the country.
Yeah.
I clearly remember then the likes of five alive. We're no longer seeing foreign ones. That was when we actually started manufacturing some of our jewelry. That is one out of many other things that we started doing. Of course, Nigerians were not happy that the borders was closed and then nothing was coming into the country.
Yeah.
But to some extent, it actually helped us to develop, to realize, okay, what are the things we have here in the country that we can consume?
Yeah.
Maybe we need to stop living this high and mighty life we live in, just like you were saying about cutting the cost. How many leaders are willing to say, all right, for the House of Representatives, this sitting allows that it's so amount. Why don't we cut this? For this money that we spend on cars, why don't we start patronizing our own cars that are made here in the country?
True.
For this and this and this, how can we start working on cashew nut and start exporting it? How can we start working on our oil? Whether it's talking about the soya oil or whatever oil we have, that we can start needing. Just leave the crude oil for a moment and let's look at other sector, natural resources. We have gold, we have diamond. Mention them, everything that we need. We have it here in Nigeria. It's all about, all we need to do is just to sit back and see how can we redefine it, refine it, and also send it out. Since we also want to have refined and oil back into the country, especially when we have to export our crude oil and still buy back
oil,
the refined oil. So why can't we think about, I think when we start doing that, just like you said, that is the only way the Naira will have strength. But when we don't look in that direction, I'm sorry, whether we buy the petrol at 100 Naira per liter, we'll still have to, because eventually we saw how much the NNPC are owing. We are owing the NNPC because they are the ones who are actually, subsidizing the fuel for us. So you could imagine there is a lot that is going on. And I know, of course, governance is not easy. But then just like the president said, he knew what he signed for when he said he wants to be the president. His wife said they do not need the wealth of Nigeria to run the country because God has blessed them with their own wealth. So let us see you cutting the cost of governance so that Nigerians can also feel the effect. The $800 billion palliative, we are hoping to see how many Nigerians are going to benefit from it. We've seen Borno and UBA are part of the state that will be buying this petrol at a higher price. What I'm hoping to do for people, because believe you me, if you look at poverty rate, it's coming from the northeast most time because of, they are not even allowed to go to their farm because of insecurity. So a lot needs to go into, looking at how we can help the inflation rate and how Nigeria can be better. We just need selfless leaders to help us achieve all of that. Still on TBS Standard, that is the Business Standard newspaper. Government making every effort to keep country's economic vibrant, Prime Minister tells the GS. Air travel in first class at government expenses suspended. HC finds Dr. Hughes guilty for tax evasion, orders him to pay over TK 12 CR. You can find more. We've seen the picture story here showing the inflation, the tax, and how its effect is on people. And that's not just in Bangladesh, but also in almost every country in the world. And that's all on the TBS newspaper.
On Punch Sport Extra, Frankfurt Lille lead race for £30 million on Orban, Osimhen not United property. Boniface for Belgian Porty Award. You can find the details on page 6. Sevilla 1, Roma 1, and then we have Seventh Heaven, and we have Spaniards beat Mourinho's men to win Europa final. We have Insurance versus Wolves, Plateau United versus Rangers. Poch won't sign Felix, Chelsea to offload 15 players. Kane only interested in United move. We have Saliba makes huge Arsenal demands. You can find the details on page 5. Titanic battles, all foes rekindle rivalry in Federation Cup semis. Insurance Wolf clash in Lagos in Bendel Derby. Plateau Rangers lock horns in Ijebu Ode. At the downside of the paper, Ten Hag coy on Greenwood's future. You can find the details on page 4. Bournemouth leads Chales Osayi Samuel. You can find the details on page 7. We have angry Madrid fans walk Chukwueze. And that's all the news on Punch Sports Extra.
Thank you so much, Rachel.
You're
and
welcome,
this is how
Sally.
far we can go on the program.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to all our viewers, our supporters. Thank you to the crew members and everyone who make this program a success. Until we come here again, to have a blessed moment.